It's my pleasure to introduce a number of very important speakers. We are very happy to have with us tonight someone who's come into town especially for this event, Dennis Edney, who is a Canadian lawyer representing Omar Khadr and one of the accused of the Toronto 18. Dennis has traveled frequently to Guantanamo Bay. And this is part of his campaign to win Omar Khadr's repatriation back to Canada. So please give a very warm welcome to Dennis Edney.
I arrived in Toronto just a couple of hours ago, having left to get here. In the last little while, I have been traveling to all kinds of places. To universities, lecturing in places from San Francisco to Yale, from Halifax to Vancouver, back to Toronto, anywhere and everywhere. And I decided to do that because when I came out of Guantanamo a number of months ago, I realized that the only thing that was going to save Omar Khadr, or Khadr, is a political solution. A simple call from our Prime Minister to the President of the United States. I understand that's all it would take. And I've been doing this because at the end of the day, if Omar Khadr is found guilty in Guantanamo, I will be able to reasonably rest for having said that I've done everything I possibly could do to save Omar. And why do I do that? Why do I travel, spend my own monies, abandon my law practice, at times abandon my family, and move from being not only a lawyer, but almost a full-time lecturer? It's simply because I believe that Omar Khadr is a just cause. That Omar Khadr is worth fighting for. And because I know Omar Khadr, because I've spent years fighting for Omar Khadr, I simply cannot walk away from him. There are times in life when you don't walk away. There are times when there is something that's so worth fighting for that you do it, regardless. And I'm not saying to you that there haven't been times when I wanted to walk away from Omar Khadr. Tonight I feel that way, I'm tired. When I look at my bank account, I feel that way. There are times I've prepared speeches that I would say to Omar that I'm not coming back. But I can't. And when I speak to my wife and my family about my feelings, they all say, we've got to keep struggling for Omar. And when I think about walking away from Omar, I think of when I first met him. After years of fighting for Omar, I recall my first arrival in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, a place that I have great disdain for, a place that I suggest to you is evil, a place where Omar Khadr has spent a third of his life, and a place where he has been abused, tortured, and continues to be abused. And when I met him for the first time, Omar was not in any of those caged prisons that you have seen on television, as terrible as they are. Omar was in a secret detention center that the Americans don't like to talk about, called Camp 6. They now also have a Camp 7, even though we talk about shutting down Guantanamo Bay. And I recall walking into Camp 6. First of all, it was a concrete building in the desert. I saw no windows, surrounded by barbed wire, and some of the toughest military people you'll come across. And it was deadly silent inside, because it's designed for deep psychological deprivation. It's designed, as they would tell you, the Americans will tell you, for enhanced interrogation techniques, which is code for torture. And Omar was sitting in a concrete cell that was windowless, chained to the floor, handcuffed, looking pale, looking ill, twitched all the time, freezing, blind in one eye and difficulties with the other eye. And he had withdrawn into his mind. He hadn't spoken to anybody in months. And I could remember that image, because every time I've thought about, oh, I can't go back there, I also think of the first time I met him and that solitary, lonely image of this young man. And I spent 2 days talking to Omar. And I talked to him not as a lawyer, but as a father. And there are many parents here tonight. And I say to you, when I think of Omar, I think less about Omar from a legal perspective, notwithstanding I've been in almost every court you could think of. But I think of him from a parental perspective. And talking to Omar, I talked about who I was, about my wife, about my children, about anything and everything. I described Canada. I described my lake. I talked about fishing. I sort of exaggerated my fishing talents. I emphasized the peace of my lake in northern Alberta. And all the while I kept talking at him, I kept looking at his eyes to see if he was going to engage me. And at some point in the second day, I was running out of things to talk about. And I pulled out my wallet. And I pulled out photographs of my youngest boy playing hockey. One of those hockey cards every parent has, the name of your kid's team, your kid's picture in the middle of a card telling you his age, his date, his weight, and the name of the team. And at some point, Omar took the photograph and felt it with his fingers. And it was at that point in time that Omar and I communicated. He to me and me to him.